Have you ever met someone who reminds you of someone else? Or has anyone ever said to you, "You remind me of somebody I once knew"? Or someone might say of a mutual acquaintance, "Doesn't he or she remind you of?" And you just can't see the resemblance at all. A couple of years ago, I was in a big store in Ames, and a young woman came up to me and said, "Oh my gosh, you look just like my mother." And she even asked if she could take my picture to show her. Well, they say we all have several doubles in the world. I've always been impressed by the people I've known who, for me, the key descriptor I would use is transparent. They're so open and honest that you can see right through them and into them in a very beautiful and positive way. Do you know anybody like that? It's like when you talk with them, you can see their heart. They're so genuine. The other day, I was listening to a reflection that Father Michael gave, and the thought that came to me was that he reminds me of God. Now, before he might hear this and feel overwhelmed with pride, what I mean by that is that his words brought me to think about God. He reminded me of God. When I was in Bolivia, I remember seeing a keychain that said, "God can't be seen, he can only be recognized." And that thought has always stuck with me. It is so true. God is spirit, but we are created in his image and likeness, so that means that we reflect God. Isn't that pretty awesome? In chapter 13, verse 35 of John's Gospel, we hear Jesus saying, "By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." That is how we reflect God. That should be how others recognize God. Can people recognize God in you? Are people reminded of God when they're with you? There's a very old Jewish story that contains this same wisdom. A rabbi once asked his students, "How do we know when night has ended and the day has begun?" Immediately, the students thought that they grasped the importance of the question. There are, after all, prayers that can be recited and rituals that can be performed only at night, and there are prayers and rituals that belong only to the day. It is, therefore, important to know when the night has ended and the day has begun. So, the brightest of the students offered an answer. "When I look out at the fields and I can distinguish between my field and the field of my neighbor, that's when the night has ended and the day has begun." A second student offered her answer. "When I look from the fields and I see a house, and I can tell that it's my house and not the house of my neighbor, that's when the night has ended and the day has begun." And yet a third student offered an answer. "When I can distinguish the animals in the yard, and I can tell a cow from a horse, that's when the night has ended." Each of these answers brought a sadder, more severe frown to the rabbi's face, until finally he shouted, "No, you don't understand. You only know how to divide. You divide your house from the house of your neighbor, your field from your neighbor's, one animal from another, one color from all the others. Is that all we can do? Divide? Separate? Split the world into pieces? Isn't the world broken enough? Split into enough fragments?" No, my dear students, it's not that way at all. The shocked students looked into the sad face of their rabbi, and one of them asked, "Then, Rabbi, tell us, how do we know that night has ended and day has begun?" The rabbi stared back into the faces of his students and with a gentle voice answered, "When you look into the face of the person who is beside you, and you can see that that person is your brother or your sister, when you could recognize that person as a friend, then finally the night has ended and the day has begun." So as you go about your day, take time to recognize God and give others a reason to recognize that same God in you. Wouldn't it be great if at the end of the day someone says, you know what? He or she really reminds me of God.